And I know many of you are going to say that this isn't a real flyer, the Bloodstalker, but I'm going to start with this thing in at the number 10 spot, as I think it is deserving of this list, as, you know, it is a kind of airborne creature, and yes, there are some gliders on this list, so you could say flyers and gliders, and I'm bending the rules slightly, but either way, talking about the Bloodstalker, this is pretty much your best bet on the Gen 1 expansion map, and if you're just playing on Gen 1, then this is like the only creature which you can use to really get around. There are no other options accessible to you, as flyers aren't allowed on that map, and this thing can absolutely zip across the map and is a really great water creature as well, which is actually what I use it for the most, ironically, considering I'm talking about flyers in this video. I don't really use it as much for its, you know, kind of Spider-Man-esque abilities. I mainly use it in the water, but still, it is an insanely great flyer. You could say, yes, I know it's a glider. I'm just going to call it a flyer for the purpose of this video. And yeah, it really can get around insanely quickly. There is a bit of a learning curve with control, and I'm still not great at controlling these things. But, you know, at least I've done the Alpha Bog Race mission on Gen 1, so I have that as a little claim to fame. And also, learning these things are great for Gen 1. Again, those missions are going to get you hexagons, so if you learn how to fly one of these things, then those bog spider race missions are going to be really easy, and they're just a really useful creature to learn as well. So I think if you haven't already and you have access to it, give the Bloodstalker a little go, and you may find that you enjoy it quite a lot. Next up, we have the Wyvern, and this creature is definitely one which has to be on this list and does actually count as a real flyer and not a glider, but I'll stop talking about that now. Either way, the Lightning Wyvern is my preferred Wyvern, so that is why there is B-roll of that particular Wyvern in this video, and they are actually one of the faster flyers in the game, although it may not seem like it. They are, and they really do rack up when it comes to flying, and, you know, they deal a lot of damage on top of that as well. Their only real downside being their, frankly, annoying taming method, and also their rubbish turning circle, but that isn't really what you're going to be using these things for. You're not going to be doing handbrake skids down a highway with a Wyvern for that instance, even though there aren't even really roads in Ark. That's a pretty niche thing. Either way, if you're on the ground and you press C, they're actually pretty good wood gatherers, which most people don't take into account for. But they can also, on top of being great wood gatherers, be great creatures for picking up other creatures as well, which a lot of people do use them for. And it is kind of buggy how they pick up creatures, but, you know, it is Ark, I guess. That's just kind of what's expected, really. And the reason why the Lightning Wyvern is the best is just its special lightning and breathing ability, in my opinion, just has an advantage over the fire, poison, and ice abilities. Namely because it deals some torpor damage, I think, and it has decent range and control. Next up, we've got the Pteranodon, and this creature does have to be on this list, and although it isn't going to be the greatest flyer out there, considering its level and accessibility, it does have to be on this list for obvious reasons. Its accessibility is one of the best out of any flyer, really. The Crystal Wyvern is the only one which I can mention, which is a little bit more accessible, as a note run is really easy and no saddle is required whatsoever for that, and it is an easier tame in this thing. Although the taming for the Pteranodon is ridiculously easy. Club it or a couple of trank darts once bowlered, and there you go. A higher or even highest level 150 Pteranodon can be yours as quickly as that. And they're great for PvE players and also for PvP players as well, especially for raids early on in the game, as these things spin attack can be extremely useful for destroying things inside bases such as smithies, and also players and creatures if you're encountering anything like that. But they're also just great creatures for general travel around the Ark map as well, so, you know, they definitely have a huge advantage when it comes to that. And actually, their damage really isn't that bad in any stretch of the imagination. Although, yes, it's not going to be the greatest out there. You're not going to be getting giga kinds of performance out of this thing. They still really do pack a punch, in my opinion, when it comes to terms with damage. So, yeah, they definitely do have a lot of respect with me for that quota, considering how easy they are to tame, and also their speed on top of that as well. It's just a nice little addition to have. Their only real downside being their absolutely terrible weight and stamina, but really what can you expect for a tame this early on into your arc progress? Next up, we've got the Rock Drake, and yes, another glider, but still, it definitely does need to be on this list, as you know, airborne creature and all of that. And yes, it can't be that high on the list because it is a glider. I will warrant that. I will deduct points for it being a glider, as they aren't actually as useful for flyers in most cases, unless you're going from a place of high elevation to low elevation, then they are extremely useful, and especially on maps like Arboration, they are very, very useful. But on maps like Crystal Isles, the island, even Ragnarok, and a lot of Scorched Earth, especially Scorched Earth, considering it is quite a flat map. Yes, I know there are mountain ranges towards the north, I think, but it still is a pretty barren map in terms of a lot of elevation and a lot of things to grab onto. It is a really large desert after all. But, you know, for all of those cases where this thing is useful, it definitely does rack up. And its stamina drain is actually pretty minimal, which is great for any kind of traveling mount. And obviously its damage really is going to rack up as well on top of that. And that means you can protect yourself on your travels as well. But they do also have the speed to get out of any sticky situation which you may find yourself in. And even on some flatter grounds, they actually aren't the worst and still usable, although I'm not sure about what other maps these things do actually spawn on apart from Arboration. I know they were on Crystal Isles in the mod version of it before it became an official Arc map, but I'm not really sure what other maps they spawn on, and they may only spawn on Arboration, but correct me on that if I'm wrong. As always, in the comments down below. In at number 6 is the Mwing, and I promise that this is the last glider on the list, and there are no more gliders after this point, so if you're getting annoyed by the gliders on this list, no more past this point. They can't be in the top 5, they are gliders and not flyers after all. In terms of the Mwing though, this thing has just insane speed. Its speed is one of the best in the game, if not the best, for any kind of travelling mount, and it also seems a lot easier to control than the Rock Drake. And again, like the Bloodstalker, I have done the Alpha Mwing Glider race mission, or whatever it's called. The one on Gen 2, the Mwing race mission. Just that one. Yeah, that's my claim to fame for this thing. And also, I just really enjoy using this thing across any map, really. And this biome of the Crystal Isles is a good example of where the Mwing is extremely useful, because there is a lot of varying elevation. But they're not just insane gliders, which their saddle was unlocked at level 19, which is absolutely insane for their wealth of abilities. These things are also portable feeding troughs, which makes breeding and raising creatures so much easier. And they can also gather berries on top of that too, which is just a very nice bonus, which, you know, every creature, if they have it, it is definitely very, very welcome considering their wide use. In at number 5 is the Crystal Wyvern. And this creature, why is it so much higher than the Wyvern on the list? And I definitely do have a preference, and more for the Blood Crystal Wyvern than the Water Crystal Wyvern, or whatever this one's called. I can't actually remember. But, you know, for the purpose of the Crystal Wyvern, this one generally just looks more like what you would think of a Crystal Wyvern. It just kind of has that more Crystal Wyvern-y feel. But definitely go for the Blood Crystal Wyvern if you can. But their tame method is just so simple, they have to be in this spot. Their only real downside being the level 65 cap on, not cap, but like requirement, I should say, to be able to actually passive feed these things, which is Crystal. And it is such an easy tame method. There's a spot where you can sit on their back and then just feed these things Crystal, and you don't even have to really press anything. You just press E when it tells you to, or the equivalent button if you're those console players out there. And actually quite a lot of my viewers do play on things like Switch and Xbox. Don't really know how many PlayStation players there are out there. If you're a PlayStation player that's watching this video, comment down below. There'll be a pinned comment which I would have put there, and just chuck down the PlayStation gang, you know. Bring all of that community together, and, you know, any other gang as well. Xbox gang, Switch gang, mobile gang, if that's any of you, and also the PC gang as well. I'm sure there's still a lot of you out there. In at number 4, we have the Rgatha. And the fact is, this is probably one of the best creatures for transporting tames if you don't have access to a cryopod, which wouldn't really make sense considering the level requirement on the saddle and its very, very difficult tame method. If you didn't know already, this creature spawns on the island and the Lost Island in those locations, which are on screen right now. And actually, on the old version of Ark, they're really hard to find. Their spawns are just absolutely awful, whereas on ASA, these things are absolutely everywhere, and they are terrifying. As always, raise up your dino count if you want to get these things to spawn on the old version of Ark, and you can also use the dino arc command, which is destroy wild dinos. And there's one which is very similar to that, which is like destroy dinos, which will destroy your tame dinos. You don't want to do that at all. That is definitely not what you want out of this creature. But the thing is, in terms of its transporting abilities, it can pick up Rexes, and it is widely used in PvP use for just absolutely decimating bases, as its damage and wealth of abilities is insane, frankly. But if you want to know a quick, brief synopsis on how you tame one, you get a pheromone gland from a male Rgatha, tame a Bronto and get the resources, which are on screen now, only necessary for 100% effectiveness, of course. Then you want to get your Bronto when you find a female Rgatha, get it to aggro on you, then trap it in some way. The net gun is the best, but you can obviously get those gateways and dino gates in. That'll be a bit harder though. Then just get its health to as low as you can and use the magnifying glass, or if you have access to the awesome spyglass mod or use it, then yeah, use that, because it will very much help you in visualizing it, as you can damage it and see its health at the same time instead of having to switch between. But the magnifying glass is definitely going to work, and I think the tech binoculars will work as well, which you may have considering the saddle level requirements. Then you want to feed that pheromone to your Bronto, and then after it comes out of the trap, it is going to impregnate your dino. Also, feel free to damage it more if needed. Then after that, it will have those hunger timers, which are necessary for 100% effectiveness. Then it is just going to fall over, and sadly your creature is going to die. So don't make it a creature which is too special to you. Then a baby Rgatha will come out, press E, and there you go. In at number 3 is the Snow Owl. And, you know, this creature has a wide range of abilities, which really do need to be respected in terms of any Ark creature out there. And this really does demonstrate a lot of abilities. If you're not a Snow Owl guy, just pretend everything I'm talking about here is to do with the Griffin, because the Griffin is not on this list, but it is still very similar to this tame in terms of obviously that diving ability, although it can do damage from it, and I don't think the Snow Owl can. But, you know, the Griffin is just going to be one of those honourable mentions. I'm not going to include it in this video, as I'm not really a Griffin user. Everything that the Griffin can do for me, the Snow Owl can do for me, so I'll always use that. And on top of that, it also does have a sort of heat-seeking ability, which allows you to see any kind of organism which gives off heat, which I think is every Ark organism. Great for PvP scenarios if you're trying to track down a player, or in PvE if you're just trying to track down a dino, which you've lost in some cases, which happens actually quite a lot, and you wouldn't really expect it. And also you want to level up that stamina, not just so they can fly longer distances, but so they can heal creatures, as if you level up stamina, they can heal for longer, and that is their main ability and claim to fame, as they can heal any wild creature, enemy creature if you're feeling nice, and tame creatures as well. The wild creatures being very useful, as if you're trying to tame a creature, then you can heal it up if it's low on health, or if you've just got its health low by absolutely pumping tranks into that thing, and it will make that tame go significantly smoother for you, and you are not going to regret taming this thing. Also, if you have gachas on top of it as well, then you have yourself the benefit of feeding those gachas owl pellets and getting insane loot out of them, which is just really nice to have. And yes, it's not going to compare to the speed of the Managama, but the Managama isn't on this list as well. I'll just chuck it out as another honourable mention. But if you do have access to the Snow Owl, then I really think you should tame this thing. Very easy knockout tame, and 100% worth it because of its absolute wealth of abilities. In at number 2, we have the Argentavis, and this did have to be in this spot. It is an absolute insane creature for so many things. Namely the fact that it is like the best carrier of metal out there, and no creature can really compete with this thing on that front, as it has insane weight reduction on things like metal, crystal and obsidian. And when paired with the Anki and the Dodic, you have yourself an absolute farming machine, as this thing can pick up both of them, obviously not at the same time, but it can actually pick up some smaller creatures like the Dodo in its beak, just as a nice little ability. You can carry a player and a Dodo if you know you're that kind of guy. And obviously those Ankis and Dodics are going to harvest all those necessary resources, and then the Anki can carry it or the Dodic can carry it for you, but you'll probably want to put it in the Algae's inventory as it has that weight reduction, so the weight is going to be less. Not sure about weight reduction on the Dodic and the Anki though. Also, their saddle does act as a portable smithy, which is nice, and if you eat a dead corpse of any kind, they will also get a regen effect, which is insane for healing up their health. But before we get into the number 1 spot, I just want to list a quick couple of honourable mentions. I have to mention the Quetzal. That thing is an absolute beast of a flyer, and if you ever find yourself taming one, you're probably going to be very happy with it, although it does have quite a slow speed. Then also the Griffin has to be here for obvious reasons. Put the Managama here as well, because you know it's widely used. And with that, we'll get into the number 1 spot. And in at number 1, we have the Desmodus. And this thing has to be in this spot, in my opinion. It is just such a useful creature. It needs to be here. It has to be. But instead of me just ranting on about this having to be in the number 1 slot, what does it do? Well, firstly, it does have the glide ability like the Snarl, which I love to have in a flyer. And it's something which I think if the RG had, be really cool, actually. And I would enjoy that. But mainly their Sanguine Elixir is what makes these things great, as it is an absolute cheat for taming. 30% of that tame is already been done for you with a click of a button. They can also farm blood bags as well, making them really great for taming other ones, as you don't need to spend ages farming loads and loads of blood bags. And Bloodstalker tames are a lot easier as well. They can also grip onto walls and vertical ceilings, not vertical ceilings, vertical walls and ceilings, I should have said, like a Tapijara, and then go invisible. That didn't really work for me because for some reason my arc was just glitching out, and it also maybe I'm in the wastelands and that doesn't have a night cycle, so it only does work at night. I should mention that. But yeah, these things, absolutely insane tames with abilities no other creature even has. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I really hope that you enjoyed this one, as I did enjoy making it. And comment down below, what are the top 10 or just the best arc flyer? And I will see you all later.